Hello, everyone. Third string theologian here with Farewell My King podcast. On the other end, a mere 6 hours away, Wade J. Carey, the Beethoven of books. What's going on, bro? How's it going?
Hey, just doing great. Let's anxious to dig in on our topic today. It's
I
time
tell
to
you,
time to get real.
yeah, when I was putting together the slide for this, I was like, "Whoo, this is going to be a heavy topic." I did throw in some cool stuff for us. Now, to everyone that's listening or watching, Wade usually doesn't see the slides. So if you're watching this on the YouTube machine, you'll see that I'm going through some slides, just to help us stay on track. But so, Farewell, My King. This is Wade J. Carey's podcast for his book ministry. And how do you get a hold of Wade? Well, he's got a website. Imagine that. Just jump over to wadejcarey.com. It gives his history. It's a great place to check stuff out and connect and really learn the first of the story here. We also have some introductory stuff on YouTube, which you can find at Farewell My King on his YouTube channel. And if you're a Facebook person, Wade J. Carey author on Facebook. That's where we do our book giveaways. A crazy little puppy called Wally takes over on a Wednesday. It's just all around good time. And if Wade cooks some pizza every now and then, we end up sharing the pizza. We don't send you a piece, but you at least get to look at it. So if you let's just say you listen to one of our podcasts on Spotify, or you're on the YouTube machine and you're looking at us and you have a question or comment or something you want a little bit more information about or for us to explain deeper, go to farewellmyking@gmail. That's and we I check that regularly, and I share the whatever comes through there with Wade, and we'll either address it as a podcast or reach out to you personally and address it. So without taking any more time, please, wadejcarey.com, the Facebook page, go out there, check this out. We give books away. His latest novel, Hidden Harbor, is the book of the month for what month are we in? October.
October.
October. So October. That's the reason why I'm the third string theologian. So what are we going to be talking about today? So
Well,
this is we're going to say the naughty word, and it's not a four-letter word. We're just going to say politics, okay? And the biblical truth, the two sides of the game. But this is going to be something called the political matrix. Wade, political matrix. I mean, what is this?
well, we touched on this on a earlier podcast, and I felt like it was time to go a little deeper and maybe a little more direct, because the world is a very strange place. Everyone can sense that, and you really can't, I don't think, discern the truth about what's going on unless you remove yourself from this political matrix. I mean, just picture it. That we're trained from when we're young, and we venture out into the world. Well, I'm on this side of the aisle, or I'm on that side of the aisle, and sometimes you start out there and you switch and all that, but the key is you have to remove yourself from the whole matrix. Just think about the movie, and what happens is flushing yourself out of that way, or that paradigm that we view information in, is the only way to see what's really going on, because what's more important and what stands well above the political matrix is the truth, good and evil. And you can't really see good and evil when you're playing in the political matrix, because and I've done this in the past. You vote for certain candidate or policy, or something like that, and you'll stick by it even if it ends up being wrong, if it ends up being evil. It's just, and it's very uncomfortable, because you end up defending bad positions just because it's almost like an ego thing. That's the way you voted, and that type of thing. So I don't think you can see things clearly, by first tuning into the mainstream news, because it has become entertainment. It's not really reporting anymore. It's been entertainment for a long time, and it either slants one way or the other. So I don't watch any of it anymore.
Well, it's fear based. I mean, so fear sells and controversy sells. So the truth is not even it's not that doesn't sell, views. So
Right.
I'm going to go to our next slide here. As you can see, there is a such thing as a political matrix. Now we're talking about more in a spiritual realm, but there is a political matrix out there. If you search political matrix on the Google machine, you'll come up with something that looks like this that's on your screen if you're watching. And you can see all these words that people like to throw around. Okay. And that I think there's more than four camps now, but this document has four camps from capitalism, socialism, and there's a lot of crazy words here. But what I want to lean into weight on with this is that you see on this picture, it's two sides of the same coin. You
Right.
know, we it's still a 50-cent piece. It's just being represented by a different person. So the two sides of the same coin, Wade. And okay, we're going to get into the spiritual matrix part of this, after we cover this, the spiritual side of it. But this two sides of the same coin. You said this to me a few times in the last time we talked. I went and dug up this little, matrix thing. How is both sides of the coin affecting our culture right now? I mean, how's this fit?
Well, it's something that we've touched on in the past, and this is just another way of looking at it. It's sort of an analogy. I'm certainly not the author of this phrase, but this concept is really spot on when you think about it. And here's what I mean. We've talked about most people will be on the left or on the right politically, and when you look at biblical concepts, you have to keep a balance between the two. And it's about loving God and loving your neighbor as yourself. So Satan is always going to take whatever the truth is, and he's going to create his own false truth. And that's what he's done with the political is someone can be on the left and be within biblical boundaries. The same thing with someone on the right. It's when you move out to the far left and the far right that you got this lunatic fringe. Well, when you step out of the political matrix and you just take a look at, you got this one coin, you realize, and I put this to the test quite a bit lately with friends and business associates and whatnot and colleagues, is you take a look at the swamp in Washington. And everybody, will say, probably 9 out of 10 people will say, well, it's a mess. And it has been for a while. But there's not one of these sides of the coin that's right, because they're both corrupt. And I get very little pushback when I say it. It's like, look, it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. You are, if you're supporting a party and not right and wrong, then it really doesn't matter. You can go back through most of these presidential races are 2 terms for this one, 2 terms for that one. It just floats back and forth and nothing gets done. And people know that. I think we've become more aware of that now. So, trying to take the high road and apply things in the political matrix to what's, good and evil, it just doesn't work, because they're both corrupt. They both stink. And I really don't see why there's a need for political parties at all. I mean, what is the purpose of it other than for Satan to put us into thought concentration camps?
Well,
And you can only think this way or only think that way.
It was originally, of course, we know everything's originally made for balance, because there are people who don't think the same, and I guess having, two different parties or two different types of personalities, and when you're doing government stuff, some people on the right might leave some behind, and some people on the left might, do some. There's really never going to be a balance to the scale, but it's funny how everyone kind of screams that they want unity and want balance, but then their actions and behaviors 9 times out of 10, and I'm not talking about if you're red or if you're blue or if you're green or whatever it is, we tend to want to put the stakes in our camp and for us to win on everything our way, right away, Burger King kind of thing, you know. So,
Right.
you know, all these things look the same, and you know, really, they just act differently to their population group who's viewing them. So, someone that, you know, if you were going to talk to someone that, let's just say they've been, you know, hardcore radical, as you know the common words would say now, on the right, or the lunatic fringe on both sides, if you were speaking to them about this two-sided coin, what would be, hey, this is what the truth is in this scenario?
Well, let's big picture. You posted a really nice, something that might be from a political science class, and that's fine, but that's downstream. Good and evil is upstream. The gospel is upstream. God is upstream, and when we look at these things, there's some basic concepts you can look at. For example, on the far left, you've got your Marxism and whatnot, and let me be very specific about this. I've said it before. Fascism is a far left concept because it's big government control. That is always on the far left. People on the far right want limited to no government, and then the further right they go, they want theocratic government.
Yes.
And that's really what the difference is. So when you're looking at basic concepts to understand the political process, I call myself a constitutionalist because I believe that the Constitution was anointed by God to last for a certain amount of time in history, and that the United States has become this, as some describe, and I would agree, the greatest country in the history of humanity. It provides the balance to make sure that the big government cannot take over, and that we have sovereignty, that the people, we're a republic. So, we determine not big government, but also that we'll never become a theocracy. As I've said many times, as far as I can tell, when Jesus said it is finished and the temple curtain tore, that was the end of the theocracy. And that's when we entered the fullness of the second covenant, or the new covenant rather, and because the old covenant was always going to be replaced, and that was prophesied in Jeremiah 31 and confirmed in Hebrews 8. So there was always going to be a better covenant, and that's the covenant of grace. So balancing, grace and the law, right in the middle, we should have these freedoms, and that's what the Constitution does. And that's why it's wonderful. And that's why I think it's anointed, not because I think America is this, that, or the other. I look at that and I say, only God could create that kind of balance, because that's the kind of balance he expects us in. God is a God of law and order, and he's also a God of grace. And typically people will want to step on just one side of it and say, well, for example, we should let all these people into our country, because, that's loving your neighbor. But God does not like law breaking, and you got to keep that balance. So there's got to be an orderly way to do this. As we speak now, my wife has been in the United States for almost 50 years, and she's going through the process of becoming a citizen. She's actually got a green card and a foreign citizen. There's an orderly way to do this and a right way to do it. So you can't say God, well, he would want us to do this and do that, without keeping the balance of his law and the laws of the place where we live.
True. Well, and we have a process. I mean, you can't go into Canada without an ID, and if you don't have one, then you're going to be sent back. So, I believe some of that is more of, it's the noise that is distracting us. Of course, there is stuff happening down there, but I just think it's another piece of noise. So I want to take us, because this is going to, there it goes, Wade.
All right.
I finally got it in there. You said something about the movie. I love this movie because I like making a parable out of it. This is from The Matrix. And you can see, if you're watching us, this is the Matrix screen at the bottom. And you got Neil up here holding his hand up, stopping these bullets. And I think, what I'd like for us to talk about a little bit is that when I see Neil stop these bullets, you know, I in a parable in my head believe that's what Jesus is telling us to do with the evils in this world. Okay. He didn't change the bullet. He just changed where that bullet was going, and he protected himself from it. And I'll lead you, and I'll turn the mic over to you. It says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him, nothing comes into being that has not came into being." So we could stop there and just say, there's nothing been created that wasn't created through God. Am I right?
Right. And you know, everything is in the Christian faith is focused on Jesus. And everything that he does, Satan tries to counterfeit. So the whole idea, and to be honest with you, I thought The Matrix was okay. My wife really likes it, but when I looked at our current situation in the last few years and what is going on and how much hatred and turmoil and all of that, I finally realized that Satan, you know, has created this matrix to stick us into, so that when you see people going against each other, Satan's behind it one way or another, period. Because God says, love your neighbor as yourself. Satan says, get the other guy, get the other guy. And so, you know, when you apply the general rule, it's easy to be able to interpret the events that are going on in this world. And, you know, I believe when they get to the bottom of you know, when they finish draining that swamp up there in Washington, when they get to the bottom, they're going to find an enormous amount of greed for money, with money laundering, stealing our taxes, people getting rich off of our tax money. And you're going to find extreme perverted sexual sin. And they all go together. Money, power, and sex. They all go together. They're all bedfellows. And, you know, that is always the counterfeit of what God tells us to do. And so, again, The Matrix is a beautiful depiction. It's an incredible analogy. It was way ahead of its time. If you want to understand, you got to move to good and evil. You can't be thinking in terms of red or blue or that. And I'm telling you, I see a lot of people that they will just die on that. Hey, I'm straight up blue, and that's it. And that shuts down discussion. It shuts down dialogue. It shuts down your ability to interpret events through the lens of good and evil versus politics. And I think that's dangerous. And that's why we are where we are today, Ray, is that we are allowing Satan to counterfeit the truth, and we get put into these concentration camps, and he doesn't want us to get out of them. But I think people are waking up and flushing out of that matrix, because, you know, you're seeing people across both sides of the aisle realizing, hey, this thing is screwed up, man. We need to get it fixed. So keep your eyes on Christ and stop paying attention to every little thing. Don't interpret the events that happen through politics. Interpret it through good and evil. What is happening here? And like I said, if you got people going against each other, almost every time Satan's going to be behind that. Not that there's not just wars and that kind of stuff. It's just that Satan is almost always going to be behind it, because when we are fighting with each other, we're not fighting against him, who is the true enemy.
Well, and then, I mean, it comes into, this is part of the progression of biblical literacy, people truly understanding their faith, and then maybe being taught their faith through different camps, I would say, you know, if that's the proper way to put it. I know that was a really big deal, you know, in the 2008 to 2015 era, where, you know, it was almost like Republican churches and Democrat churches. It wasn't Christ-based churches. I mean,
Right.
you know, it was more of a political affiliation than it is a place where we go to worship the one who made all things, the one that creates all things, and the giver and taker of our own existence. I just think sometimes we crumble and lose sight of a lot of our hope through the political sphere, when really the hope that we have, he already did what was determined to do on a cross. And for the people who don't understand that, this is where this is a critical topic, because without Christ and a believing, in a gospel and a saved life, then the only thing you have left is two political parties, and which one's going to protect me and treat me the best. And it's a basket with no bottom. There's no hope.
Yeah, I mean, once again, when we identify with something that is counter to who God is and who is revealed, in Jesus Christ in the Bible, when we identify with humanistic things, we're not going to find the real truth. And, it reminds me of something I've shared before about, the analogies I use in my Hidden Harbor book, which we're featuring this month. The expression that, a Christian should be a battleship, and because we are born into spiritual war. And I agree, but I think the difference is this, and it wasn't until I was writing this chapter, last year before I published the book, that I realized that is being a battleship is great. You can have all your gun turrets, but what are you aiming your guns at? Are you aiming it at the people you're trying to help find the way to Christ? And let's go condemn these people. Like if you're on the right, well, let me go get these Democrats and all of that. No, our job is to show people the truth. So our guns should be aimed at the enemy, who is Satan, who is the force behind all of the animosity in the world through the sin that entered the world. I mean, he is the original, one who evil entered the world through. I mean, he rebelled against God, then he corrupted God's children, and ever since then, people have been fighting with each other.
Yeah, I mean, and I think part of what we need to remember, and I've said this in a life group, and I said it on the podcast. Jesus is not coming back with an American flag tattoo and an AR-15, singing the national anthem. He's just not.
Right.
But then also, Jesus is not coming back to cut down the rich and wealthy and redistribute all their possessions. So I mean, you got both sides of the camp, where
Right.
He's not coming as the social worker in the sky, so so to speak, where he's going to equal out the playing field and everyone's going to be as holy as everyone else. And then he's for sure not coming back driving an F-150 and with Busch light cans in the back. I mean, it just I mean, it's just there's some jaded opinions and views about what's really going to happen. I mean, the Bible is very clear that every knee will bow. Every knee will bow. And if you take that into consideration, that every knee is going to bow, no matter what you believe, no matter how big, how tall, what color you are, what language you speak, your knee's going to bow when them clouds part.
Right.
And he returns. That is a lot more scary to me than I believe I should have that one right before I have my political party affiliation correct. And it's hard for me to affiliate. I know me and you've talked about this a lot. It's hard for me to affiliate because Congress and culture and everything is getting so much further away from the Constitution, which I'm not saying Constitution's the Bible.
It's not.
But it's a standard. And
it reflects biblical boundaries. And that's why I believe it's anointed, not because it's American, whatever. It looks to me like God anointed. I mean, I've shared before, I read the book 1776 by McCullough, and, that Continental Army, there's no way the United States should even be here.
Oh, yeah.
And without the providential element of God stepping in. But since then, Satan has been, fighting against it. And I think there's a lot of corruption throughout all of our government, and we, the people, should be demanding that we get back to the Constitution. And someone's saying they support the Constitution, but their actions don't follow. That's somebody that needs to be called out. And I don't care where they're at, what party they're in. If you're not disgusted when someone says one thing and does another, and they're representing the people, I mean, if that doesn't, pardon my French, piss you off, then you're not paying attention. You're in the matrix.
Yeah,
but if it does,
and that matrix, and then sometimes that matrix is everybody's life. I mean, we've had conversations with people where they can't even talk about the Bible without blending in left and right. I mean, it's such a falsified view of what Christianity, what the Bible, and what true biblical life and living is really about. We're not supposed to be a part of the, we're not supposed to go to the mountain and hide, even though we want to. The reason why some of these things are happening and the way they're happening, because we're losing so much of the biblical influence in our schools and our governments and our, local governments, is a Christian bailed out. The Christian men and women bailed out of these positions. And, it's like, hey, well, I can't be a part of culture. Well, there was no place where Jesus or any of his disciples just went up on the top of the mountain and screamed the gospel from the mountain and got people saved. No, they were in the culture. They were involved in the processes. So I think part of this matrix is that there's a matrix of people. There's some people that's stuck in the matrix and they're Christian, and the matrix that they're stuck in is they're not getting involved in this with their belief system, with their convictions, and standing up for what's biblically correct. Now, and not everything that's biblically correct is going to be legal. I mean, the legal system and, biblical, what Scripture tells us sometimes differ. There's legal and then what Jesus tells us to do. Kind of like when they shut the churches down during COVID. That was a legal order that the church probably shouldn't have, people might argue with that, but I don't think that's a law that they should have, hung with. So what you think about that?
It's one of the guys I follow, Frank Turek. He says something brilliant. He talks about God doesn't force anybody into heaven against their will. And, there is freedom to choose. And I'm not getting into any of that other, freedom of choice and all that. I mean, those are silly arguments. God is sovereign and all knowing, and we get to choose. They don't cross paths or it just is. However it is, it is. And in our political system, that's what I think the Constitution does. It allows us to live free. I have always believed that, well, this should be a Christian nation and all that. And I don't believe that. Well, I believe, that as a citizen, I support the Constitution. As a Christian, I want to be free to write my books and to share my faith. And I want people to be free to tell me to pound sand or, hey, I want a little bit more of that. That is the freedom since Jesus said it is finished. That's the freedom of the new covenant. And that's what we have to mirror, and I'm telling you, on the far left, people are trying to make government their God. And a lot of people on the right are trying to make this, a theocracy.
Yep.
And both are in grave error. Leave the
grave
freedom.
Grave danger.
Yes.
Yeah.
When we depart from the way the balance that God created in this universe. And let me tell you something, in the spiritual war, and I've written, many, many books about it and continue to, in the spiritual war, we have body, soul, and spirit. Our body relates to the environment. Our soul, which is our intellect, personality, experiences, that relates to other people. And our spirit, which separates us from the animal kingdom, is made in the image of God. We know what good and evil is. And Satan is always trying to take these three things and toss them out of balance by 1 degree. 1 degree off 10 years later is many, many degrees off. Yep. And that's the essence of the spiritual war that he tries to do. And that's how people end up exhausted spiritually. I believe it's behind a lot of depression and some of these other things. It's not just one thing, it's all three things. And if he can just picture, like a plate sitting even, just kind of tilted of these three parts of our being, tilted just a little bit. and he does that through the politics. So if you're on the left, hey, that's how you are. You lean more toward other people and loving your neighbors yourself. And if you're on the right, maybe you're more of a strict law person. But when you start venturing beyond God's boundaries and God's balance, there's where you're in error, and that's where Satan wants you to be. He doesn't want you close. So a liberal and a conservative have more in common with each other than they do with the people who are on the extremes in the lunatic fringe. And that's what I think is happening in the Great Awakening, this wake up that's happening, is when you see people on the left who say, hey, you know what? These people behind me who are trying to shut down free speech, I'm not down with that. And neither should they be. Oh, yeah. But on the right, listen, if somebody, you can't force somebody into heaven because God doesn't do it. So you want to call them and tell them the truth. Somebody's sort of like the Ray Comfort example. Somebody's stranded on the railroad tracks and they don't know the train's coming. How loving can you be to not want to run down there and tell them? But ultimately, it's going to be them that wants to get off that track or not, because we don't control that. We don't understand those things. Our job is to be a herald and to call out what the truth is. And you can only do that through the freedom. You can't force it. We can force ourselves to get out there and share. And this is really more your wheelhouse. Why don't you comment on that?
So, but before I make a little part about that, is like, I want to tell my brothers and sisters that are on the left, you're not wrong, but you need to right yourself with that. It's not what you seem. It's not what it seems. And you need to identify that this is a two-sided coin. And my brothers and sisters on the right, the same words. We need, and there will never be complete cohesion. I understand that, and honestly, I don't think I want that. I don't want a bunch of yes men and women up there running a country, but there has to be a place where we meet and do what's right for America and who we support through the Constitution and through our morals that we've written in that Constitution. So when and a lot of this is that when you step out to your truth, if you're more willing to talk to someone, let's just say you're a professing Christian, you profess Christ, and hey, I'm sold out, I do all the Christian things, but you're more interested in talking about your political affiliation than what happened on the cross. I think that two-sided coin, you need to get it and put it in your hand. Okay. Because that's the problem. 100% of the problem. I mean, if Trump or Biden or Pelosi, whoever it is, if they are more important of a topic and take up more of your mind space than what Jesus has already accomplished on the cross and what he told us to do as the Christian, I mean, you're in error and you need to repent. And for the non-believer that's listening to this, that says, man, this is nonsense. Well, the Bible even told us that this would be nonsense to a non-believer. It's hard to believe that one man was God and, born of a virgin, and, all the sin of humanity was cast onto him and then crucified by the same people he came to save, which is the Jewish culture, and not only died from that because God allowed him to die, a perfect human being, then rose him from the dead 3 days after that to prove that this is not the end. The oxygen we're breathing and the clock that's ticking for us, when it expires, that's the first expiration. There is no second expiration because eternity has no time or measurement to it. And you might want to consider exactly how you would want to spend that second half, So we have a couple minutes left, Wade. I want to give my 2 cents to say, hey, thank you for everyone supporting us, supporting the ministry, buy some books. This is not a sales thing for us, but, this is how we keep ourselves going. If you have a prayer list, put us on it. And if you need to be on ours, send us a message. I'm gonna let Wade take us and kind of close us out. And my closeout portion is that pray for our brothers and sisters, or pray for God's people in Israel and Gaza and Palestine and all these places, because I'm not a really big end time prophecy kind of guy, and I think a lot of things have to happen before the return of Christ. But it is stated that even Christ himself doesn't know when that's going to happen. God will tell him that that's going to happen. So just like when you were a kid trying to steal cookies out of the cabinet, when your mom and dad was asleep, you were always aware of every sound and everything going on. You need to be aware of what's happening around you, and understand that if you filter this through your Bible, you read your Old and New Testament, and you begin to be a Berean and study this book, you're going to find some amazing things that are taking place in our time right now that we get to be a part of. But just pray for this war, because this is not a war against two countries. This is a war against good and evil. Wade, there you go, bud.
There you go. My message is simply is quit hating your neighbor, because when you're doing that, you're playing the enemy's game. For people on the right, don't hate the people on the other side of the aisle. Learn to find common ground, and let's be citizens together and have civil dialogue. That's the only way anything gets accomplished. And if you're more on the left, don't hate someone just because they're a Christian. Someone living out their beliefs with conviction, even if you think they're wrong, it doesn't matter. I mean, respecting your neighbor is so important. And like I said, consider good and evil, instead of, well, this is my party platform, because good and evil cuts to the core. It gets to the truth. And that's what, if you want to play in the political matrix, you're not going to find truth. You're going to find your truth. But the truth is, we live in a great big world with a lot of people with a lot of different beliefs. And if you're really an intelligent person, your beliefs are going to evolve as time goes on. And if someone can convince me, lay something in front of me, good evidence of a position I have, then I have to hear them. And if they're right, I should be not so proud to say, hey, you know what? I never thought about that. Maybe you're right. And if that's not happening, and if you're hating your neighbor, then like I said, you're playing the enemy's game, and it's never going to go well. We need to start getting back to respecting each other and understanding our country was founded on the principle, and this is really where it all hinges, on free speech. Because throughout history, only the bad guys are shutting down free speech. The good guys allow it and respect it.
Amen. Well, thank you, everyone. Hey, remember, less than 500 years ago, we used to cut people's arms open to cure a headache. We don't do that anymore, because we learned and we figured out that we can be wrong. We love you guys. Thank you. Pray for us as we pray for you. Wade J. Carey, Beethoven of Books. Thank you, my friend. This is Ray Newman,
Right.
the third string theologian, signing out. Later, buddy.
See ya.
Bye.